I started this podcast, and that's why I called it Mind Shift, is because so much of my life now that I'm sober was this gift of perspective, and shifting it into being grateful those things happened so I could then benefit others.
My name is Jenna Lanini, a serial optimist navigating the intricate paths of recovery and real estate. And since April 2018, I've embraced a sober life, finding success through the magic of perspective. And in 2021, I dove headfirst into the world of real estate with no prior experience, but equipped with a mindset that's proven to be my most powerful asset, enabling me to sell over 10 million my first year, which I've continued to surpass every year since. What's the secret to success? We all want to know. But it's not just the know-how or the years of practice. It's the transformative power of perspective. It's about seeing possibilities where others spot roadblocks, choosing to amplify the positive over the negative, and harnessing a newfound perspective as a catalyst to achieve anything. Join me as we uncover the power of shifting perspectives. Each episode will unravel the ability of our thoughts to transform obstacles into opportunities and doubts into determination. Because in this thing called life, the true game changer is not merely our skills or knowledge. It is the ability to reshape our outlook so we can ignite the flame of possibility that exists even in the darkest of circumstances. So buckle up, y'all, as we embark on an enlightening journey that will unlock the hidden power of our minds. This is Mind Shift, where we embrace the transformative power of perspective to achieve the unimaginable.
So today, Brian Woody, and I know you from all sorts of things, but the most fun thing is my cousin randomly being like, Brian Woody, I know him, and then you saying, wait, you're related to Nick?
Yeah.
And it's really cool, like what a small world, synchronicities, which we'll always talk about as well, what a small world, and then Juicebox, and all the things that you've done, and it really has only been like 7 years?
Yeah.
6 years?
7 years.
Yeah, and it feels like forever.
Yeah.
So you're one of my dearest friends, so I'm so excited. And today we're going to talk about probably a lot of random stuff. We'll go all over the place. But most importantly, you're an author.
I am now. Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So cool. So tell us a little bit, like give us a little background on you, and then we'll jump into things.
Well, as far as the writing is concerned, it was one of those things that I tried to escape from, in college. Like I didn't want to write. I didn't want to public speak, and it's funny because my first job when I got out of college was teaching, and I go into this classroom like 60 college students, and I'm like, this is public speaking.
Yeah.
And I walked outside, walked down the hall, puked off the balcony, came back in and taught a wonderful semester. Was
that a different school than Squaw Valley Academy?
That was Colorado State University.
Oh, that was before you came to Tahoe.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. And so I had a teaching career, and I wanted to write. I wanted to express myself somehow, and I can't paint. So I've always liked the written word. So I had a friend that I taught with at Squaw Valley Academy, and he taught writing, and he taught me how to write. And so he just kind of trained me and whatnot. And
Cool.
The advice he gave me was just keep writing, keep writing, keep writing. So I've written a lot. I've published a lot of articles and scientific papers, things like that, but never a book. Well, I did publish a book.
You did?
A math book
In the
about
math,
10
yeah.
years ago, but I took it out of circulation because I had a discrepancy with the publisher and they didn't see my vision. And so maybe I'll go back and revisit that someday, but this one here was kind of my opus, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, and that you will weave it in, and for a lot of people it might not even make sense from my perspective how I say it, but being a calculus professor, a teacher of this type of mathematics, I feel gives you a really interesting view on some of these concepts. Because I think for some people, and we'll talk about the God thing, some people are like, I can't believe in this thing that I can't see. But for you can offer a perspective where it really is there. Like it actually exists so people can see it and it tangibly makes sense, which I really like about like the alien stuff, right? Like interdimensional travel, those types of things. And so offering that lens for people in a way to grasp it and maybe accept that divine, because it really is tangible. Like that's a really cool thing. So I think weaving in that calculus experience to this was also really cool. And so, yeah, your math book and then this book, it's kind of like a perfect match.
Yeah. That's how there's a side of me, this grumpy side of me, and it's like, if I can't prove it, it doesn't exist. As a mathematician, it has to be proven. That's the whole thing. It's all about proofs. But can you prove that you love your husband, that you love your family? No, right? But
Yeah.
it's real. It's the most real thing that you know.
Right.
And I always think about how times change, and before we understood electricity with Maxwell's equations and whatnot, which predated Einstein, we thought of electricity as a demon, this force that we could not understand, that was intangible and lightning, and just struck us every once in a while,
Yeah.
And now we understand it. So who knows, maybe in 100 years from now, we'll understand consciousness.
That would be so cool if it
Right.
just became like a thing like electricity.
Right?
You
never know.
Easy to comprehend. But that's the crazy part, right? Like I think some people are so much more willing to comprehend this, and maybe it's just the willingness. Or maybe it's easier to comprehend because of their willingness. Or is it just because, and we were kind of talking before recording, is it just a lack of experience or being shown it or taught it, I guess? Because if you're around a circle of people that don't talk about this stuff, why would you talk about it or understand it? Whereas when we're around each other, it's all we talk about.
Yeah.
We could be hiking in Maui and we're talking about some sort of level of divinity and or willingness or God consciousness. So maybe I just feel like I'm lucky because I have friends that love this stuff, and that's
Yeah.
why I love doing stuff like this, so
Yeah.
other people can hear it. Super cool.
Yeah, right?
So for the book, was there a specific thing that inspired you to write it, or was it just that idea of spreading the awareness?
Well, I'd been writing for some time, but it's kind of like practice. You got to practice everything, and I've written a lot that I've never published. So we went on the Kalalui Trail in Maui, and that was amazing, right? It was just, you have to be so present, because if you don't, you're going to fall off a cliff, and you have to be careful of each step, because if you twist your ankle out there, I don't know how you're going to get out.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful experience. We hiked in, and we found this place in the jungle, and we were going to go to the beach, that's a bigger part of the hike, but we just decided, this is wonderful, let's stay here. So we stayed in the jungle and we hiked out, and I was just in this space, this really peaceful space. And my friend Gary, that I'd been working with on a spiritual level, he had cancer. We thought we got it all out. We thought he was going to be fine. And then I get off the trail and here he's going into hospice. We were there for a little bit longer, and I'm going to go see him when I get home. And I still am holding out hope, that this is going to turn around.
Yeah.
And I get back and I contract COVID for the first time, right? And so I didn't want to lay that on his family. I didn't want to go there and be like, so I had to say goodbye to him over the phone. He couldn't talk, but he could hear me, and I guess he smiled when he heard my voice and things. So it was, how it is in this place where you have bad things happen, but they don't have to be bad things. If you have the right perspective on it, it can be a beautiful thing. And we're surrounded by beauty, not negativity.
Yeah.
So I took that energy and something just happened. It just came through me, and I just sat down at my laptop and I typed for 2 weeks,
The
probably
coolest thing,
10
and then when
days.
you say this, and I always think about, it's like the flow state, and you talk about it in the book, and then remember that book, I think it was called Catching Fire?
Stealing Fire.
Stealing Fire.
Yeah.
Oh, and they talk about that too, and it's so cool.
Yeah.
But when you talk about, like, all of a sudden there's that moment, and where it comes from is likely that pace of gratitude from having that sort of love and compassion for someone, another being, and then being in that state, and then being able to, like, effortlessly produce something that's not easy for someone to just sit down and write. Okay,
Yeah.
but that's super cool.
Yeah, I've heard it said before, when you're helping others and you're not in yourself,
Yeah.
your higher power can move through you
Yeah.
effortlessly. And I felt like something was moving through me. I don't feel like I wrote this book, to be honest. So it's good, because when people say, if somebody says to me, I don't like your book, it'd be like, well, I didn't write it.
Wasn't
so.
my words.
Almost
like a channeling.
Well, you never know. There's that flow state, when we're
Yeah.
engaged in our passions, everything moves through us. And I've been talking to Mandy down at Nevada Fine Arts a lot, and they've been incredibly supportive. And, we did a podcast and we talked about the creative process. And I never really thought about that before, where when you're creating art, artists will say that it just flowed through them, that they were just a tool. and that's exactly how I felt with this, which is good because it's a book about the ego, and it's nice to stay out of that because the ego says we're good or we're bad or we're judging or whatever, and I don't have to judge this. I can just let it be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you write this, and it literally, how long did it take you? Because I remember we talked about it, and I was super fortunate to be one of those first people that you told and kind of let read some of these first words, but it didn't take you very long.
No, I want to say it took 12 or 10 days. Kelsey was like, I think it was more like 12, but it doesn't matter. It was
Less
under
than
2
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't even think that
Crazy.
was possible. I've heard of people doing that before, and
Yeah.
it's like, what is the quality of work? I don't like to tell people that before they read it because they're like, well, what's the quality of work? And I've been over that book.
If you're dedicated, yeah.
Yeah, I've been over that book. I've probably read it 3 dozen times.
Yeah.
I've listened to the audiobook 12 times probably, and every time I'm surprised by it. Like I wrote that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't sound like me. It sounds like the best part of me. It sounds like my good friends are speaking.
Yeah.
And so it was like a fever.
So cool.
And it was, I can't really recall it. I was just in this flow state where it was just coming out.
And then it made it easy for you to really have like a starting point, a beginning and an end. Like it wasn't like you had to sit there and think like, do I need to add this or remove this? It just really came out.
It was just over at one point, and the editing process took a few months.
Yeah.
Going through and fine tuning everything and kind of looking at something and judging it, over judging it. And Kelsey read it, and I had a few other beta readers yourself, who were giving me feedback, and there wasn't much that was changed.
Yeah.
It was more like some tweaks in the language, some quotation marks were changed from, English to American style, stuff like that. But it wasn't really the words that were changed.
No. Yeah. And then, so reading it from, my perspective, it's really cool. And again, we kind of talked about this before we started recording, but a lot of this stuff, we've talked about over the years, and it's some of our best moments, like sharing these thoughts about channeling information, that watching these people that we really like and they say this stuff, and I'm sure Bashar would say the same things, right? Like not knowing what he said, and you come out of it. And so me reading it, I'm like, oh, this is great. Like you've compiled it into this thing that is super easy to digest, because really you look at something like The Course of Miracles. It's a book this big that I'm reading right now again, and it's a lot to digest. I probably would have to do it 17,000 more times. So you've really been able to like put some of the best parts in that, which is really cool. But for you, like what is the overall concept? Like explain to us like what you are trying to accomplish with this.
Spread the message of spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Everybody can have it. And I think we really need it. And it's a
Yeah.
daily thing, it's a daily thing. And you mentioned The Course in Miracles, and that's this big, thick book, but it can be broken down into one simple sentence.
Totally.
Separation is an illusion. Separation is an illusion. I'm the universe experiencing itself right now.
Yeah.
So are you.
Yeah.
We're no different. It's just we have these different spacesuits,
Yeah.
and we have different experiences and things like that. But when it really comes down to it, there's no difference at all. It's just we're kind of warped by this illusion.
Yeah, and some of the main things that really stick out, and that's the same thing, that separation is an illusion, but also fear and guilt, and some of these things that really block us from living an abundant life, from living in a state of joy, which is what we come here in, and then everything piles onto us, right? Those layers of like experience and dims that. But the best part, I think, is just the overarching theme is like the Bashar thing, right? Like there's no such thing as lack.
Yeah.
You will have like an abundance of lack, but there's no such thing as lack, right? And it's the coolest thing, and most people are like, but what does that mean?
Yeah. I quote him a lot in
Yes.
there, and I don't attribute to him, and I think it's stuff like that is supposed to be plagiarized. Course of Miracles is designed to be plagiarized.
Oh, yeah.
And the stuff that Bashar says, you can look at and you can judge the situation and say, here's this guy who says he's channeling an alien, but listen to the words that are coming out of his mouth.
Yes.
Who cares where it came from? This stuff is beautiful. His 5 laws of creation is amazing, and I feel like this guy is like, if he is faking it somehow, he is a scholar in the Course in Miracles, because he's saying the same thing that the Course in Miracles says. He's saying the same thing that Buddhism and Taoism and true Christianity is saying. And true Islam is saying, that we're not separate. The kingdom of heaven is within us.
Oh my God, there's the best. Have you seen that like GIF thing where it's like this chair that's like on the, like an altar, like in a church, and it's like all dusty with cobwebs, and it says like, "Sorry, we have moved," and like seek God within, and that's what it says on the thing, and it's so true.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's so true. And then I love like, so we started going to church again. Brett is a huge church guy since he got sober, and it's a cool thing, like honoring that for him and like getting back into that and being in these services. It's really cool to have another experience of the same thing. And I leave and I'm like, it's all the same.
It's just a different perspective.
Yeah.
And you can use that. I think Christianity gets a bad name sometimes because there are people that try to force their idea of God on you.
Yeah.
And that is not God. That is
No.
the ego. You know,
Yeah.
that is me saying you're right, I'm wrong, or I'm right, you're wrong, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But when you look at it and you read the words and you take it as it is, you know, there is so much wisdom and so much beauty in there.
Yeah.
You know, and Eckhart Tolle does a great job of describing the New Testament. And I really love his interpretation of the New Testament where, you know, Jesus is, he's an example of a being that lived without ego.
Yeah.
You know, and he said the kingdom of God is within, and he would say things like, you know, you can enter the kingdom through me. And he's not saying like he is to be worshipped.
No.
You know, he's saying just act like this, be
Yeah.
like this, and you will find the kingdom of heaven. You know,
Yeah.
think of others first, serve others.
Yeah.
And it's you know, Hanuman, which I talk about in the preface, that's from the Indian epic. You know, that's from a Hindu culture.
Yeah.
And he's the god of service who serves his god Rama. You know, and he says, when I don't know who I am, I serve you. And when I do know who I am you. So service can break down that separation.
Yeah.
You know, so when we serve others, we see that we're all the same. And you know, in Namaste, they say the divine in me sees the divine in you. And that's true forgiveness. And this is stuff that Jesus said. This is stuff that Lao Tzu said, you know, and it's something that we know internally, you know, and we're all trying to describe the same thing. But when I say that my perspective is right and your perspective is wrong, that's when it breaks down and that's when we have problems,
Yeah.
right?
So the funniest thing when I was thinking about this morning and like listening again to some of the chapters, so I started this podcast, and that's why I called it Mind Shift, is because so much of my life now that I'm sober was this gift of perspective. And when I got sober, I was really shown the value of like, ultimately, like, I'm happy all the things happened, but this gift of perspective and shifting it into being grateful those things happened so I could then benefit others.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool. And then I'm like reading this, I'm like listening to what you're saying, and it's so hard for me to do audiobooks. I'm too much of a squirrel.
Right.
And then I'm like trying to write notes because I'm like, oh yeah, this is like all the things, right? So I wrote this, like, mention of the victim mentality, Maya, the illusions of this world, and how we identify. And these are the things I seek to resolve daily. And then like from my lens of addiction. And it's just so interesting, like not necessarily, because in the book we talk about these like layers of experience, right? And I'm thinking when I'm reading this as an addict, I'm like, I'm taking that experience and almost like removing it.
Yes.
And then I'm like grateful I get to like see it over here. And then it puts me in that state to really be present for like what's next. And I think that's helped my journey of sobriety. Because I live in like the constant, and you know, and more than anyone, of like, I'm pretty positive and life is pretty fucking magical.
Yeah.
And so reading this stuff and then like writing it and hearing it from you, it's really beautiful. Like how you can just write this book and it like so succinctly explains these things. Like I was kind of blown away. I'm like, yes, exactly.
I think we like to read things that remind us, you know, of what we already know.
Yeah.
You know, and
Or tell us like what, like reaffirm maybe, because for something, like I think some people may not have the success in recovery, right? Like they're like, how can I get out of this? How can I actually find sobriety? And maybe that's it. Like you hear the same thing over and over, but one time it finally clicks. And that's a cool thing too.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I want to be truly grateful for the present moment, I have to be grateful for the past, because if I didn't have that past, I wouldn't be exactly here right now.
For
And in the book, I talk about quantum retrocausality, which is something they proved or demonstrated an experiment in 2017 at University of Austria. Was that in the quantum scale, future events affect present events just as much as past events do.
Yeah.
And when you're in this place of the infinite realm, right, where time ceases to exist because a photon lives in that space. A photon of light lives in that space.
Yeah.
And a photon of light travels at the speed of light. And at the speed of light, time ceases to exist. So if you are a photon of light, you see the past, present, and the future all at the same time. It's all one. Right? So causality completely breaks down too. So if I'm grateful for this moment right now, right, and I have this terrible, terrible past, but I'm truly grateful for this moment right now, I'm redefining that past now, okay? And I don't know, maybe I'll wake up tomorrow morning and that past will be different. How would I know? You know, so there's a lot going on here that we can't describe, that we can't know, but we can look at these lessons in physics and see what true reality is. I think true reality exists in this place where the photon exists, in this infinite realm where causality, space, and time all break down. In the Course in Miracles, it says, minds are connected, but bodies are not. I am not this body, right? So I can gain a better perspective on what's real. And I forget which Maharaji said it, but I completely lost my train of thought.
You know. I know you do.
Yeah. The only thing that's real is that which does not exist. Or the only thing that is real is that which does not change.
Okay.
So what doesn't change? You know, I think it exists in this infinite realm of light, basically. And how many times in scripture and spiritual teachings do we compare love and light and God and say these are all the same things? And I think that's where it exists, outside of ourselves. But also, that's what we are. I think because we have mass. See, if you have mass, you can experience time. Then you experience the process of creation. I can see a beam of light crossing the universe. Where in that state of the beam of light, it doesn't experience that. So I can experience the process of creation here. And Bashar talks about that too. And the Course in Miracles talks about that. This process of creation that we get to witness because we are in this illusion of time and mass. Right?
And what a trip.
It is.
And then thinking about like, okay, well, if you are having trouble with something to be grateful for, the idea that you're able to exist in this time, allowed to experience the illusion of time and then creation. And I think one of my favorite concepts is just that, like reality creation. And if you have the ability to live in that gratitude state and understand that the past and present and the future are all the same, what you're able to do with your life is like astronomical.
You're limitless.
Limitless.
You have the power of the universe at your
Yes.
back.
And people think like, you know, whatever, I'm crazy. But when you actually sit down and have a conversation with somebody like you and you're talking about it from a perspective of science and math, these things are true. And then I always tell people like, well, and it's the same thing with God. Like if he either does or he doesn't exist. Like I'm going to choose does, right? Like in this stuff, it either does or doesn't exist. But it does, and it's evidence in us just sitting here.
Right? Yeah, I mean, people sometimes, I'm sure you've heard this before, you're a Pollyanna. You're toxically positive.
Yes!
But it's like, I love my life. Like, I absolutely love my life. I love everything about my life, and I never thought I would love my life, you know? I always had some complaint, and I think, you know, we have this judgment, right? Like these judgments that aren't real, and we need to turn our back on that stuff. You know? Like I am not anyone to have the power of judgment, right? So I can judge your conception of God, and now I'm out of the spirit, you know, and I can have these judgments of this and judgments of that. But if I completely turn my back to that and live in the positive, right? I'm not judging so much, even good or bad. You know, you can train your mind to not judge good or bad, and you're not going to be perfect, but it'll leave out those situations where you just become conscious when you're in a situation where you're judging, right? Like, so if I get triggered by something political or religious or whatever, you know, I'm in that space of ego, right? Because the spirit doesn't get offended. Right? It can't get offended. Only the ego does. Like, don't you know who I am? Or, you're wrong, I'm right, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But if I can look for the good in anything, I can be happy no matter who wins the presidency. I can be
Right.
happy. I can look for the good, you know, in
Yes.
all of that. I can be happy going to uh, experience a different spiritual tradition. Kelsey and I, when we went to Maui last time, we went to Ram Dass's house. Who, That's
Yes.
where I'm loving awareness comes from, right? That was his mantra. And we sang a chalisa with this guy in the temple of Hanuman. And
Cool.
I don't really know too much about Hinduism.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't raised in that religion. All I know is what I've read over the last, 7 years.
Yeah.
But it was such a beautiful experience, you know. And over
bet.
Christmas, we went to church with my parents, and there's no judgment there.
Yeah.
And so it was a beautiful experience. And so if I can walk into these situations with no judgment, I can have a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really what pulls us out of positivity.
Yeah.
Is I'm going to judge this thing now. And so the lessons in the Course in Miracles, for the first 20 lessons, you're learning how to perceive without judgment, which
Yeah.
is what chapter 2, I think, of the book is learning how to perceive without judgment. And that is true intelligence. J. Krishnamurti said that. He's the Indian philosopher, and he said that to perceive something without judgment is the highest form of intelligence. If I can look at this thing for the first time and see it as it's the first time,
Yeah.
maybe something that I've seen a million times. Because every time I see a car, I'm associating
Right.
that with all my past experiences with cars. Even the color yellow, I'm associating it with all my past experiences with the color yellow.
Yeah.
If I can just look at it without judgment, I'm seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's a rebirth.
I was just going to say,
Right.
it's like it allows you to experience life in a whole new way.
Yeah, in a good way.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think that's helpful with people that, and I don't know, maybe it's just what's been helpful for me, because with addiction and like mental health, and there's a lot of problems I think the world has right now, a lot of which stem from mental health. And this idea to walk into a situation and see it as a chance to like a connection, as a chance to really see the divine in the world.
Yeah.
And learn something from somebody in every situation and offer something to the room, and not in a way of like I can give you some, but just like make the room a better place. And that's helped me a lot in business, in relationships. Like if you're uncomfortable going to places, I'm like, just go there and see what you can learn. And typically you'll learn something from someone that's like, you talk about in the book, that experience with the gal in the store behind her. And you give somebody the opportunity to really experience a gift in this life, and it could be a very small moment that could change somebody's life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that
Super cool.
judgment pulls us out of the flow state.
Yeah.
And if I'm letting the spirit, my higher power, flow through me, it's going to affect other people.
Yeah.
Just like hate affects other people. I can be grumpy.
Yeah.
I've always thought about that. You go into a grocery store and you're grumpy with the clerk, and you upset the clerk, and then she's grumpy with the next person. That person leaves, and he's grumpy with that person. And it's just like this. I think when I was in college, I remember reading that violence was the most contagious disease in the United States at the time. Violence, this disease of hate, and that made me really sad. And so I think when we are given the opportunity, I tell the story of the grocery clerk.
Yeah.
I give her the name Anna. I couldn't find her, so I couldn't get her permission. So I used
gotcha.
Anna as in anonymous, right? And she's just such a wonderful person who every Sunday night I would go in there, and she was happy, and I was not happy to be at the grocery store on Sunday night because I don't know what my problem was.
Yeah.
But I told her I was thankful for her. That's all I had to say, is that I'm thankful for you, and I'm thankful for your positive attitude. And it just opened up this floodgate where everybody around us was affected.
Yeah.
And everybody left that situation better and not worse.
Yeah.
And that's how I think it's up to us to do that, to go
Yeah.
around and leave this place better than when we found it, right?
And it's like, it can be very simple. Like
Simple.
this isn't even like grand acts.
Yeah.
This is really just saying hi to somebody and greeting somebody that like in a monotonous situation, like at your Starbucks, like having a conversation with them, like them feeling acknowledged is a huge thing in somebody's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Being seen.
yeah,
Yeah.
being seen. Okay, there was something else I wrote down that I keep trying to pull back to. Oh, it was the same thing, the genuine connections with others. Okay, and then I loved it. So hearing you talk about, and I think again, it's nice to be with, like, for me, I feel like my spiritual growth has been very great because I've had these opportunities for with others that contribute to like this conversation about divine oneness. But I do like, the even further down the rabbit hole type stuff. And when I watched my favorite movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, and Edgar Mitchell is in there.
Yes.
And he talks about this experience. And so when I heard in the book you relate to that, I'm like, this is awesome. Because it truly is something, I think that, well, not everybody's going to get to go to the moon and have that experience of being in a vast empty space.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, like, when we're in Hawaii and like we go to the back of Molokini and dive, like, and I just go out to the blue water, and that is what I experience, this interconnectedness with the universe. And so I love that you talked about that. And so, like, why did you put that in the book? Like, tell us more about your perspective on this.
Well, chapter 3 is ego death, and that's when I bring it up. And ego death is not, we can't completely be done with the ego. If we did, we'd walk out into traffic. It's a self-preservation mechanism that in our, through millions of years of evolution, we've come up with this. And it's kind of went haywire now because we're not getting chased by lions anymore, And so there's different ways to shift your perception, right? So maybe it's through visiting Molokini.
Yeah.
Maybe it's through taking LSD, which I talk about in the book, right? Or traveling to the moon, but we don't have to do those things. And I think that I talk about the dangers of taking drugs in order to have a shift. It can change your mind, but you have to sustain that. You know, it's the crash course, right? It's the crash course. And so there are a lot of downsides to that. A lot of trap doors, I think I call them.
Yeah.
But once we have that shift in perception and we can see how things, maybe not how they truly are, but just turning your head and looking at something a little bit differently and realizing that I've been looking at this world through my own eyes and my own experiences for so long that I've put myself in a box.
Yeah.
And I think with psychedelics, it's a great tool. It's not for me. It's not for a lot
probably
of
not
people,
for me either.
right? It's dangerous, but I think if it's life or death, there's one guy that I read about who he had to turn his oven off and on 500 times before he left the house, and if he lost count, he had to go turn the doorknob of his house like 20 times, and so he had developed these neural networks in his brain that were so grooved out that this is the way he had to behave. And I understand that. Well, he did psychedelic therapy and he was cured.
Crazy.
Right? But those neural networks still exist. So he could easily go back into that state. It's like with addiction. Those neural networks are already there. With negativity, those neural networks are already there. But I can put a fresh blanket of snow on them and choose another path.
Okay.
Right? And so we have these things over here that I could pay attention to. I could pay attention to the negativity. I could pay attention to this and that and get back into my own ways. Or I can shift my perspective towards love and connection and oneness. And, I think we have to have this tough exterior.
Yeah.
People hear me talking about this stuff and they say, you don't look like you would talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I want love in my life, and I want peace and compassion and all these things, and if I choose to see that, that's what I'm going to get. If I choose to see the negative, that's what I'm going to get. It's all about what I choose to see. And some might say you're deluding yourself, you're living in a bubble or whatever, but what is that? What is that? When I'm living in negativity, I'm living in a bubble.
And it's no different. It's just that they're choosing to do it in through a different lens, and like it doesn't matter what you choose, because they're also, people are also labeling it good or bad, right? So if you think the negative is good and you want to be in that space, go for it. I tend to believe that being in this over here makes me feel good. I'm a feel good junkie, and it works, and it has worked.
We've both done the negativity. We both know where that leads us. And I think most people have tried that.
Totally.
And they know, but it's like you'll get this argument. Is that reality? There's a lot of bad stuff going on in this world. So I can look out my window and I can see beauty. I don't have to listen to the news that's telling me what's going on in Timbuktu. And I understand not a lot of people have that availability to them where they can look out. If you're living in Ukraine or Gaza, you're not looking out your window and seeing beauty. But there's a book by
But there are people
Victor,
there that are probably seeing beauty.
There are.
Because we get these stories over like time, right, in history, and these amazing stories about people that live through these like horrific times.
They chose that. They chose to have that perspective.
Yep.
And it wasn't easy.
No.
And Viktor Frankl has a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust. And I talk about him in the book. And he says the last of the human freedoms is to choose your own reaction and your own perception given the circumstance. And he was able to lift people up during the Holocaust, you know, and people who got, you know, and I don't fault them, but when you get into this depressive state and this negative state because of your outside circumstances, you're going to go deeper. You know, if I'm looking to the outside world to give me reassurance, or if I'm looking at the outside world to make me change inside, so like what Bashar says, right, that it's not the conditions and circumstances do not create my state of being. My state of being creates my conditions and circumstances. And there's a lot of things I can look at in my life right now that might not be that great, but I'm not going to.
Yep.
Emmett Fox talks about the golden key, and Emmett Fox was influenced Bill W.
Okay.
Right? And he was a Christian mystic that lived during the beginning of the 20th century. And he talks about the golden key. And the golden key is no matter what's happening in your life, put your mind on God.
Yeah.
And his idea of God was love and oneness and all this other kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be an anthropomorphic God with a body or anything like that. He said, just shift your thoughts to love, and this stuff will take care of itself. And I've seen that happen so many times over the last decade, where I've just put my mind on all the beauty and wonder in my life, and these problems just take care of themselves, and they turn out to be better than I expected.
Yes.
Instead of hyper-focusing on them and then ruining my perspective and going to bed angry and waking up in fear and all these things that I've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever read any Neville Goddard?
Oh, he's amazing.
So good. And I think that Emmett Fox, that was what jotted that. And when anybody comes to me with like, well, what you talk about spirituality, like what do you do? Like you go to church? And I'm like, no, I read a load of Neville Goddard.
Yeah.
And it's this thing, and it's allowed me to really understand the I am nature of that, which is all over the Bible and a lot of religious texts. And it really is like, if you really break it down, it's talking about yourself. And it's the most amazing thing. And I go back to like the addiction thing for me, and when, you know, you have all these issues and it's like, how do I fix this issue? And whatever it is that happened. And for that time, before we really get through that stuff, it's like that justified resentment because like somebody wronged me and like I deserve to drink. But when you get past that and you realize like all this stuff that happened, like it was horrible, but then I also have the choice to be well and to save myself and to like walk out of that burning building and to choose love. And so it's this like really cool thing. Like I did all that, but I can also do all of this. And that's like the coolest thing about all of the mysticism I love. And when those types of books, because it empowers somebody to really believe and not in a like egoic way, but that we are all the same thing. We all want the same thing. We all have the same powers. And it's funny when you said that earlier about Bashar, and you know, 'cause he's like channeling an alien.
Yeah.
So the funniest example of that is Abraham Hicks.
Yeah.
In so many sales coaching and all of the things, right? People love Abraham Hicks. I'm like, do you know what she's doing?
Yeah.
Do you know who she is? Like, she's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then when people find out, they're like, oh, like, but it's like, it's okay.
Yeah. It's not until you judge it. And
Yes.
now I'm going to judge it as quack, you know?
Yes.
And then the magic's gone. And it's like, why not just believe? It's
Yeah.
like Santa Claus, right? You're not going to get the gifts if you don't believe. And it's like, what's the problem with a little kid believing in Santa Claus and getting gifts and everybody having, there's no problem with that. And, you know, I have people in my life who are young people who, you know, you can look at them and say, man, if, you know, you're doing it all wrong. And I'm sure there's a 90-year-old person that's looking at me and saying, I'm doing it all wrong. You know, we could look at these little kids and say, you know, whatever, but it's just, none of us really know what we're doing, you know?
No.
You know, but we can live in this space where we're not judging when it helps.
Yeah.
You know, Abraham Hicks and Bashar, they've helped so many people, and Christianity has helped so many people. And I could look at it and judge it, but hey, maybe it's just not for you.
Yeah.
I love what Bill Wilson said in the Big Book. Be quick to see where other religious people are right.
Yeah.
You know, make use of what they have to offer.
Yeah.
And it can be such a beautiful thing, you know.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cool. I love it so much. Okay, so there was another part I was like, I'm trying to remember, but I knew.
James Allen, I'm sorry. James Allen was a contemporary of Neville Goddard and Emmett Fox.
Yes.
And his was the last book I read, A Man Thinketh, I think is what it's called. And that was the last book I read before I wrote this. So it was a big influence on that. But these guys, these mystics from the early 20th century.
Long time ago.
100 years ago, you know, and like who was around at that time. And you think about the energy, you know, and all these people saying the same thing, you know, Neville Goddard. I love what he said about assume. Wayne Dyer talks about this a lot. He likes to quote Neville Goddard. He says, assume the state of the wish fulfilled. Like assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Be grateful for something you don't have yet. Be grateful of, you know, if you want this in your life, be grateful for it before it even happens. And you've already assumed that feeling. So it doesn't even matter if you get it, does it? You know, it's all perception. Like Jim Carrey talks about it a lot.
Yeah,
you know, he's a student of the course, right?
Yes.
Says he wishes everybody would get everything they want in life to see that it's not that important, right? What's important is what I know is real in here.
For sure.
You know, this life breath I have.
I think the coolest part, because, okay, like we talk about, and like you and I have had these conversations too, right? Like if you assume the wish fulfilled, and I actually have an episode about that in my previous season, and Gretchen, you remember Gretchen who lived here? So she was on it and we talked about that because we're huge Neville Goddard people. But anyways, assuming that wish fulfilled, right? We've talked about this. And when we started our like business careers, and you were doing this long before me, but even that switch from professor to instructor and tutor, and we would talk about like, what do you want to do, right? And remember we got these like the journals, the yearly planners.
Yeah.
And we wrote that shit down.
Yeah.
And I tell people, because they're like, how did you do so well in real estate? Right. And like, well, I assumed the wish fulfilled, like purely. And I mean, I work a lot too, but it's that, like, I told myself, like, you're going to do X, Y, Z, and I have done it. And it's the craziest stuff.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. You write it down, and I feel like the biggest part is having people. And I've said that over and over. Like, you have been that person, you know, and then finding the other people in our life that are, like, just as crazy. Like, when you tell them your goals, and you're like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like, go make $1 million.
Kelsey
like,
has been such a great influence on me. Sometimes I'll go, what are you thinking about? And she's like, nothing. I'm just enjoying the moment. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you. You know, she's this great influence in my life, you know, and she, you know, like we're talking about assuming the place of the wish fulfilled and my book maybe being a bestseller, you know, and reaching tons of people. And she's like, it's already happened. It's already happened. And I don't want to say this before it happens, but I'm working with a foundation right now that might be able to put this book in front of 1.4 million prisoners. Nice. And they're going to pay for it. And, you know, nobody makes money off this, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is people who need it are going to be exposed to it. It's not like I'm stepping on my own market. You know, it's not like they're ordering books from Amazon. You know, so when you're open to these things where I want 1 million people to read this book, well, look at that might happen. Yeah. That might happen. And it's kind of how we point in that direction. And it might not happen on our timeline. And it might not happen exactly how we expect it to happen. Yeah. But if it happens according to the will of the universe, it's going to be better than you expected. For sure. Because I'm this fragile, messed up human being with strange perspectives on things, you know, and the will of the universe is perfect. Yeah. So if I can let that work through me, what I'm going to get is going to be way better than I ever expected. Yeah. So I remove the expectations and pray for acceptance of the outcome. And that's all we can really pray for, right? Yeah. Like we can't pray to have this immutable force change its mind, right? We can pray to accept whatever that's going to be, you know, and that's peace right there. Yeah. You know. I know, it's such a crazy thing. And I think we could go on and talk about it like forever too, because the power of, you know, really like setting your intention, whether it just be that, right? Like the acceptance and setting the expectation to have no expectations and showing up for those moments in life has really been, I think, transformative for me because I'm a really like go person, you know, and I fill my days and I do a lot of stuff and then like, I love it.
And I realize, at the end of the day when I'm like, we like call it my decompression time. Because Brett's always like, are you decompressed now? And it's like 8, I'm in bed. I'm like, no, I'm like thinking about things tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's been such a cool thing for me because it is that flow state. So it's not like I'm sitting here dreading these days that I have that are like 16 hours. Because for me, it's like that state of, I'm just accepting the moments that are coming that I've built for myself. But it's so amazing in those moments. And I think it's been a really cool thing that seeing the divine in those moments, like meeting the people that I get to meet and because of other people I've met and like having these genuine conversations, whether it's about stuff like this or about real estate, which is very genuine too. It's about people's whole life. And so it's so cool. And when I think about this in a conversation with you, I'm like, that's the cool part of it. When you don't feel busy, you're just doing your thing. You're writing a book for 24 straight hours. And it's so cool. I love it. Okay, so for the book, what else are you doing that's coming up? Because I know you've been on like Colo. Oh, and what was the Nevada Arts?
Creatives Talk podcast.
Creatives Talk. Okay, cool.
So we're doing a book signing March 1st at noon at Nevada Fine Arts. People are confusing this with Nevada Museum of Art. No, Nevada Fine Arts is a store downtown on Virginia. It's right across from El Adobe.
Cool.
Right, and it's such a cool place because you walk in there and you feel creative immediately. And there's all these different tools that you can use for your creativity, paints and.
Cool.
Yeah, Kelsey wanted to get something framed, and we must have been there for an hour. Her choosing the frames that she wants, and
it's really across the street from El Adobe. Okay, cool. I guess we'll have to go there.
So March 1st, big day.
March 1st. Yeah. What time?
Noon.
Noon on March 1st. That'll be super cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
And then aside from this other really cool thing that hopefully comes to fruition for you, what else are your plans for this book?
Oh, well, I just had it translated into Spanish.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's coming out soon. Probably 6 weeks is the timeline we're looking at. Cool. But it will be out before I go to Peru this summer. I'm going to Peru and Ecuador and Galapagos, and Kelsey got me a trip for my 50th
For your
birthday.
50th?
So crazy, because that's my bucket list. I mean, I always thought about doing these things, but when I was sitting in my apartment depressed and feeling sorry for myself and in self-pity and in this vortex over here, none of these things, I thought about them, but they weren't a reality. Yeah. It wasn't something that was going to happen. But now I believe these things are going to happen, and they happen. We like to say, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
But if you believe it,
You'll
truly,
see it.
you will see it. I mean, I think that belief is so powerful. Faith. Yeah. Faith, right? It's, instead of forcing things and whatnot, I'm just going to have faith that if I live this way, if I live in love, miracles will abound, synchronicities will abound. And you know what? Try it.
I was just going to say that. I was like, just try it.
Just try it. Try it for a year. Do the course. If you do the lesson in Course in Miracles every morning, your life will change. If you truly believe that these powers exist. Yeah. And who knows? Maybe I am living in a fantasy, but I love this fantasy. This is the best fantasy I've ever had. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love my life. As opposed to waking up in fear.
Totally.
Saying, what's going to happen next? What's this day going to bring me? Like, oh no, I got to worry about this and worry about that. I don't have to worry about shit. I don't have to worry about shit. I just have to make sure that it's awareness, really. I can have a fear of something that may never come true. I could have a fear of traffic. I know that if I walk out into traffic, I'm going to get hit by a car and it's dangerous, but I don't have to be fearful of it. I could just be aware of it. Yeah. And, these dangerous situations you might be in, like if you're hiking and you see a mountain lion, your awareness in that situation is what could save your life, not fear. Yeah, that's Fear is an illusion. And I always step back a little bit when people say it's a healthy fear. I don't think that's a real thing. I don't think fear can be healthy. I think awareness, you're misinterpreting that as awareness.
True, yeah.
I can be aware that if I do something, there will be consequences. Yeah. And when I was first doing the Course in Miracles, they talk about guilt. And it said it was an illusion, and I'm like, wait a second. If I do something really bad, I should feel guilty about it. Otherwise, I'm a psychopath. Yeah. That's not true. See, I shouldn't feel guilty. I should have the awareness that I need to make it better. If I'm in guilt, I'm not gonna make it better.
Interesting.
Right? I'm gonna be stuck in this place of self-pity and guilt, and not able to help anybody. Right?
Interesting. Right. Well, I mean, I guess that's when you think about too, and I had, I'm I should be my husband's agent. I take him to places to share a story. because he doesn't want to anymore.
Right.
But he has such a good story.
He does.
And we did an episode with him, and it was the coolest thing. And I think he felt so comfortable because it was just like him and I. And it's interesting to think about it in that too, right? Like if we really think about who we were when we were out there, when we were doing those things, which are horrible, you wind up homeless and stealing stuff because you have no other choice. And you have to take yourself out of that. Like you are not that person. You can't be that. You have to just like I was talking about earlier, like all the things, kind of like remove it and put it in the box or like on the shelf and look at it.
Yeah.
And so you can actually utilize it in a productive way. Use it as a lesson, not be that person anymore.
Right.
And that's like an interesting thing too. Like people can't change. I think people can certainly change.
Certainly. Yeah.
Like you can completely become a different person if you want.
Yeah.
But you have to choose to.
You have to choose. Willingness. Right?
Willingness.
Right. Willingness.
And like removing those layers of all these things that we've had experienced. And some people have worse experiences than others, like that trauma, and some of these things that happen to people, it's awful. But still choosing to see a different way and like going a different path.
Yeah.
So you can kind of live in this state of abundance as opposed to like, even if it was justified, like who wants to live in the shit?
Yeah.
Like you deserve to be happy.
Yeah. And
So
it's
let's
hard
find
to
a
get
way
out
to
of
make
that
you
place,
happy.
right?
Yeah.
It's hard to get out of that place because when we have a traumatic experience, it burns it into our brain and we become identified with it.
Yeah.
And now I'm identified with it, so that's who
Yeah.
I am. And there's no way to get out. There's a joke Seinfeld used to tell where the number one fear people have is public speaking, and the second is death.
Yeah.
Right? So you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. And it's true. And why is that true? Because it attacks our sense of self. If you want to offend somebody or if you want to know fear,
Yeah.
right? That all comes from our sense of self, right? Being triggered, right? What are other people thinking? Am I not going to get what I want? Am I going to lose something I have? And it triggers this fear.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's paramount to death. Like that's not a way to live.
It's not
Right? But it's so hard to get out of it. It's so hard to get out of it. But what you got to do is just change your perception. Say that I'm going to do this. I'm going to have willingness. And I'm working with a young lady right now who's just struggling she's suffering.
Yeah.
It's a former student of mine. And, I'm talking to her today and I'm like, you are so young and beautiful, and boy, would I want to trade places with you, And it's like, if you could see right now what I see,
Yeah.
right now, and because she'll say things like it's going to take time and I'm going to have to ease into this and I'm going to no switch right now. When you start thinking about your trauma and you start thinking about depression and anxiety and all this stuff, switch.
Yeah.
The golden key. Put your mind on God. Put your mind on gratitude and abundance and all the wonderful things in the world, and these problems will take care of themselves because half of them aren't real.
No.
More than half.
Yeah.
When you remove judgment, resentments, and all these things from your mind, what do you even have to think about? Nothing. There's nothing going on up there.
No.
Everything I have is a judgment of something around me or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's all bullshit. Like, who am I to judge?
Bullshit.
Right?
It is. Well, and a lot of it's about like ourselves, like judging yourself. And I think that's also funny, like about like the fear of public speaking and how funny it is when we realize how little people care.
Yeah.
And how little people even think of like who you are, what you are, in all of that. That's also, I think there's a new book that actually came out from Mel Robinson. I've been hearing a lot about it. I need to read it. The Let Them book. And I think it talks about a lot of that stuff. Like nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you're doing, what you look like.
I might not be much, but I'm all I think about.
Yes.
Right? I think everybody else is thinking about me as much as I think of me.
Yeah.
They're not. They're worried about themselves. Everybody's just worried about themselves, scared.
Yeah.
So what do? We hold each other's hand and we walk each other home.
Yeah.
We help. People are going to notice you more when you're loving and giving and caring. Yeah. They're going to notice that, right? What Maya Angelou said, people will always remember how you make them feel.
Yep.
Right? And so I want people to walk away from a conversation with me better than when they came into that conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not about me, right?
Yeah.
It's not about me and how I can make you feel.
Yeah.
It's about connection.
Yeah.
I can connect with you and I can see the divine in you and you can see the divine in me. And it says somewhere in the New Testament, I think, wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am. Right? And you see that in addiction recovery, in the rooms of addiction recovery where people are being vulnerable and sharing themselves and people are truly listening.
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
and relating
and
for
there's
the
a
first
connection.
time,
Yeah.
and that connectedness exists.
And then trauma dissolves,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And being able to like truly like connect with somebody on like a human level, whether it's in the addiction or whatever, but like having a conversation with somebody and trying to identify the similarities and not the differences,
Yes.
I think would open up people's worlds,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe allow for some of these huge disagreements that exist in our world now, the divide, to go away, to disappear. It's like, great, have your own opinion. All of that is fine.
Yeah.
But realize the human connection that's below and beneath and above. But I think, like, again, like you and I, we love this stuff.
Yeah.
And I could talk about, you know, aliens and all of this stuff that Dr. Greer talks about all day
Yeah.
long, Edgar Mitchell, and these experiences that people have with that connectedness. And that was the other thing I wanted to talk about, because you talk about near-death experiences in the book. Okay, there's this movie that came out recently, I think probably like a year or two ago, and it talks about just the near-death experiences, which Dr. Greer had, and that when you get to that place and realize it's nothing, like it's just a transition.
Yeah.
And it's even better than it is here. And some of those people that had that experience and come back don't want to be here
Yeah.
because they realize how good it is in that space.
Yeah.
And that's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
Because I would rather, well, and I would be, I mean, great, near-death experience if that happened, awesome. But I think you can still live in a state of that
Yes.
without experiencing something so horrific.
Right.
And it's the same thing I say about addiction, or like we all say, like you don't need to ride the dumpster to the end. Like you can get off the dump truck at any point. You don't got to
Yeah.
go back to the dump. But those experiences, like everything is, it's all can be so good if you just allow it to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like the death. It doesn't have to be like the rock bottom.
Yeah.
Just utilize those experiences that you have and really realize how beautiful it is.
Right. It's
But-
a shift in perception.
But maybe we're just the crazy ones.
Well,
in the
I'm
la
a
la
pretty
land.
happy, crazy person, you know?
I would much rather be living in this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm stoked.
Yeah.
Sure, bad shit happens, but
Do you need to, you know, it's like what I talk about at the end of chapter 3. Do we need to go to the moon? Do we need to take LSD? Do we need to nearly die?
yeah.
I've been with people on their deathbeds, and you know this acceptance they have.
Yeah.
I want to have that acceptance now, not on my deathbed. I want to have that acceptance and that perspective now, and I
Yeah.
can choose to have that perspective. I truly believe that when we ask the universe for these things, to be shown these things, that we
Yeah.
get them. If I ask the universe for a new Porsche, probably not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, who knows? It depends on how I go about asking,
Yes.
right?
100%.
But
It
if I ask for these other things, then maybe something else will come. You know, like I love my car. I love it. I've always been really, turned off by materialistic things. I've always
Yeah.
been like that. But when my perception changed, you know, I liked this car, but when I drove it, I was like, I don't need this car. I don't need it. And so I went home, and on my gratitude list every day, I wrote down how thankful I was for my existing car.
Yeah.
And I did this on every gratitude list for a couple months, and this car got dropped into my lap. And I don't want to go into the whole story about it or anything, but it was effortless. Like, wow, I'd be silly if I didn't take this deal.
Yeah.
You know, and now I get to experience. Every time I drive my car, I'm like, this is fun. I love this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But of course, that came through this higher level. You know, the material possessions are great and we can enjoy them and whatnot, but really it's the happiness in my heart. So when I'm thankful for what I have, more things just get dropped in my lap. When I'm thankful for where I am right now, that state of gratitude, it's a cycle, and you get caught up in this cycle of abundance. And it's not about greed or anything or like that. That's negative. It's about, you know, maybe you can be an example to somebody else who are like, hey, 10 years ago, this was my life. Now this is my life. I have my job. I love my job. You know, I'm so thankful for it. And I get to go and have these experiences when I consult. And now when I go out and I consult, it's people see something in me that they want, right? And they want me to be a part of their team. And I've had experiences where I go in a temporary consultant and I walk away with minority ownership in the business because they want my presence there, right? Because I spread the message, you know, and I bring people together. And it's not, I say I, but it's not. It's a power moving through me because I got the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think the coolest part about all of this is that this book that you wrote, I Am Loving Awareness, which is available on Amazon.
Amazon, and the audiobook is on Apple
Audiobook is
Books.
on Apple Books. Thank you. And we'll link all that stuff in the podcast notes. But the coolest part is that there's a couple other things I want to talk to you about too. But a lot of this is like, you embody this. The biggest problem with religion, I think, today is that people preach, but then watch their actions. And that's a really cool thing. And I think that's why spirituality is so much more well accepted, because it's more of like a way of life. And so that's why I think this is huge. And so I'm super grateful that you wrote something like this, because it's a little easier to digest than a big old book, A Course in Miracles, maybe the big book.
Yeah, I tried to abridge
Condense
it.
it.
Yeah, the Course in Miracles as much as I could. And it's a lot of different things. You know, you can quote. I quote some stuff from the Sikh religion in there too. The Sikhs are amazing, their perspective.
Okay, so the book, awesome. We're going to link a bunch of stuff so people can find it.
Awesome.
Audiobook is also great. I do have to just throw it out there to the world that I prefer it as your voice, so maybe we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when I listen to Joe Rogan, like the way he presents material reminds me of you, and it's like an easy way.
I keep getting told that. Like,
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's, maybe just, keep it in the back of your head. But before I let you go, I of course have to ask. So Brian is my resident crypto expert, and I have yet to jump on this train. I know I will. It's because I don't know, and I have like all this doubt, not of the itself, but like of me being able to do it. But you had sent me this link, and I see it all over the place now. Like, people are buying homes with crypto. So what are your thoughts on that?
On crypto?
And it's shifting the industry.
Yeah, I mean, BlackRock, they're going to get what they want,
Yep.
right? So they want to tokenize everything. And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, like they're doing it in China, where you can get a chicken, right? And you scan it, and it tells you how many steps that chicken walked every day, where it came from, so it can track everything cradle to grave.
Jesus.
Also, like VeChain, that's VeChain, right? They track supply chain, right? And so like they work with BMW and Louis Vuitton. Like a Louis Vuitton bag, you could scan that chip and you know it's real, right? So it's authentication and things like that. But I think everything will be traded on the blockchain soon. The blockchain is this marvel of mathematics, economics, technology. You know, it's just it's something that we haven't fully delved into as far as how it's going to change our society. But right now we are in the crypto bull market, which so every 4 years, right, the reward for Bitcoin is halved, right? So it becomes deflationary. So that's why you're seeing a supply shock. So you see a supply shock after the election, right? Always. This time was a little bit different because we have a lot of bulls, right, up there, crypto bulls, we like to call them. It means that they have a positive attitude on the growth of crypto.
Gotcha. Okay.
And usually right around this time is where we see the rise of the alternative crypto market, the altcoins, right? So right now it's just kind of building up pressure. And who knows, it could be different, but for the last, 15 years, it hasn't been. It's worked this way. You can count more on a computer program than you can on the Fed changing their mind all the time and manipulating things and whatnot. This can't really be manipulated as much, and it's 100%. It's speculation, right? So it's the value we put into it, right? But when you have something like Bitcoin that has, I'm not sure what it is, $2 trillion market cap right now, it's like it's here to stay. And it's going to be used as a reserve currency for different states in the union and as well for the federal government. There's different countries all around the world that are looking into it, but it's a good store of value because you're buying real estate on the largest digital network that's ever existed. Right, and so there's a lot of different. When you go down this rabbit hole and you start looking at the altcoins too, you're buying software. So one thing that I've been looking at a lot lately is ORAI, which is an AI-powered Oracle. It'll be the first AI-powered layer 1. I got a lot of hope in that, and
Interesting.
A lot of these other AIs have done really well for me, but I think the future is going to be in AI and blockchain. It's going to be the new protocol layer of the internet, and right now what we're experiencing is that time right around 1998 with the internet, right? Everybody said this is silly, it's just for porn, and all these things, right? And now, in 2001, we have wireless internet, and everybody's on wireless internet. My brother was selling wireless internet at the time, and Starbucks turned him away.
Weird.
And it's like, look where we're at now, and
Yeah.
I see that in our future. It's going to help a lot of people. It's going to democratize things.
For sure.
Bankless people, all you need is a cell phone now, and there's a lot of bankless people in this world. There's a lot in the United States.
Yeah.
They can't cash their checks, so they got to go to these payday loan places and pay money to cash their check. Now they can just do it on their phone. Boom.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about it anymore. So it levels up.
Also,
it's a lot.
It is a lot. And I'm always like, I try to understand. The other thing is manufacturing. Or not even manufacturing, I guess, like the data centers. Do you think that that's going to come into USA Parkway? Because I think that will be huge. I mean, it already is, like Switch and stuff. I mean, where are all these places going to go? And we have all these like blockchains and like data mining.
Big data. Big data is the future. And analyzing that data and using AI to analyze that data. It's something that we shouldn't be scared of.
No, and I think for Nevada, so I was just at this thing yesterday, EDON, and it was amazing.
EDON, yeah.
Oh my God. In Nevada, like our growth in the last decade, 1,900%. Number one in any state, over any state, like insane. And partly, I think a majority is because of the manufacturing on USA Parkway and just tech coming in here for the obvious reasons, taxes. But I think this is another industry that we could see a huge shift in coming out here.
Yeah.
And again, my real estate, it's insane for our home prices.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. And as a real estate agent, it would be very wise of you to look into blockchain because it's about to take over, you can put everything on a ledger that's immutable.
Yeah.
So, somebody gave an example one time where they could change something on a house, but they could write it down a different way, I don't remember what it was.
Oh, like on a title?
Or like fireplace, or whatnot. Like I'm not saying it correctly, but these things you can't go back and erase anything. It's on the blockchain.
Oh, it's on the blockchain,
right?
yeah.
So
I think it's a good thing.
You make improvements to your home.
Yeah.
You change your home. It's on the blockchain. You can't erase it and say we did something else instead.
Right.
Which I guess happens. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so weird. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to ask you about, and we'll talk more about that later. Okay, so aside from everything we've already talked about, was there anything else that you want to say?
Oh, nothing. I mean, my book is here to help people.
Yes.
It's been the most expensive job I've ever had. I'm investing a lot of money into it and whatnot.
Totally,
So
and not like it's a lot of front end.
Yeah. It's not so much about the money. It's about having these experiences. Like this has opened the door for me where I can have all these different experiences. Somebody called me the other day because they want to hire me as a private instructor, and they read my book and they're like, your mindset, we want you influencing our child.
Yes.
And so
For
this
sure.
positivity that comes from that, professionally too, it's been helpful. And you never know where something's going to go. I've just opened the door and I've pointed myself in that direction. And if it goes this way or it goes that way, that's fine.
Yeah.
I've prayed for acceptance of the outcome. And so nothing can go wrong. I can't lose.
No, and the coolest part, like being open to it,
Yes.
right? And we've said that a lot today, is the willingness to just accept that when you do the next right thing, things are going to continue to happen in your favor. Like the universe is conspiring in your favor.
Yeah, you just got to get out of the way.
And you just got to get out of the way and, let it all happen. And that may sound like a complete joke, but it's proof our life.
It's changing people's lives around the world, and it
Yes,
has been for a
totally.
long time. And I think with the information age, now we can, people have access to this information now.
Yeah.
They can see, in Facebook, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of this and that, but I think it's the bad before the good,
Yep.
right? Where we're going to start to see how these technologies bring us together.
Yeah.
And that
think so.
connection that we can have with people all around the world.
Yeah.
You know?
No, the age of information has unleashed and the good and the bad and the ugly, but it's allowed us to see like that great awakening of like what our human potential is.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about that too. And I think, the ultimate thing is like our freedom as beings and the soul connectedness. And it's really cool. So if anybody's really starting to look into getting a little bit more spiritually cuckoo like you and I, where would they start aside from your book?
Serving others is
Yeah.
a good place to start. Going out and finding connections with somebody who is different than you, or maybe that
Yeah.
you don't even like. Try to see the good. If you're distracted right now by fear and division and all these things like that, try to turn your head a little bit and try to find the good and write down the good.
Yeah.
Make a gratitude list. You know, if this you're dealing with a company that's really pissing you off,
Yeah.
right? You can sit down and you can make a list of all the good things that could come out of this situation, all the good things that have happened in this situation. Just take your mind off that negative space
Yeah.
and then just watch it unfold,
Yeah.
right? I've done this so many times. You have done this so many times. I know hundreds of people around town even, you know,
Yeah.
not to mention the millions on the internet who have done this.
Yeah.
Just shift your perspective, start seeing the good, and then you're going to get the good.
Yeah.
You know, and that doesn't mean you're not going to have difficult times, but when you have difficult times and you can look at these situations and say, there is a gift in here somewhere. There is a gift in here
Yeah.
somewhere, right? And then be open,
Even if it's just you breathing.
right? Just
Yeah.
your breath.
Uh-huh.
Because that's the first, most important thing, right? It's the first thing we do when we're born. It's the last thing we do when we leave this world. It's primal. And there's something else breathing me,
Yep.
right? I'm not responsible for this.
Yeah.
If I was responsible, I'd die in my sleep.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
there's something else that's breathing me, and I can get. Eckhart Tolle said it's a portal to the infinite.
Yeah.
Right?
And Wayne Dyer, I listen to that stuff all the time, like when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like anytime you go to sleep, like put on a good meditation that's, even if it's just like positive affirmations, it'll change your life. And you don't even have to do much work. You just got
Right.
to turn that shit on and go to sleep.
Right?
Okay, out of all of these concepts, and you pull out quotes like it's your job. Amazing. What is your favorite quote?
I am loving awareness. I am
isn't
loving
that
awareness.
perfect?
Ram Dass says that's the only thought you really truly need.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, this is who I am. I am loving awareness. This is who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say, well, I want to be, now we're projecting in the future where you realize this is who I am right now. If I choose to be like this right now, if I choose to show you love,
Yeah.
and I can see the similarities instead of the differences, and I can look for the good,
Yeah.
and I can be compassionate and caring and find connection, like these things are right here.
Yeah.
I just have to say, I have to have the willingness, right? I just have to say, universe, here I am, you know, help
Yeah.
me. Help me to do the next right thing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I love it. So perfect.
So good.
Well, thank you so much for doing
Thanks
this.
for having me, Jenna.
Yes.
Yes.
Until next time, maybe we can just talk about free energy and all the really kooky things.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
For more information or for the full video, be sure to follow me on YouTube.